This tutorial is for the assignment number 5 in Photoshop, image retouching. There are several different components to this. So this one is specifically about the spot healing brush tool. And there's 2 files inside of the number 5 shared folder that you'll need to pull from. The first one of these is old photograph. So let's move that over, or you can file open it. And for this assignment, we are going to use this little Band-Aid brush here. This is the spot healing brush tool. If you'll hold down your mouse on it, you'll see there's also a regular healing brush that I wouldn't bother with, and some other tools that we probably won't really get into this year. But the spot healing brush tool is the Band-Aid with the dotted circle behind it, and it is also a brush, so I can make it bigger or smaller using the brackets to the right of the P. Now this is a very useful tool in a lot of different ways. This can heal scratches, creases on a face. It can heal blemishes, cuts, pimples, pretty much any small feature. This can take care of it. And what's cool about this spot healing brush is it's actually a content-aware fill, which means it will look at the area around where you want to correct and try to get the correct color and fix it itself. Now the downside to that is it isn't always very good at that, but in this case what we do is we're going to take some of these scratches and remove them. And I get my brush, I zoomed in here, and I'll make my brush a little bit bigger than the thing that I want to replace, not that much bigger, and when I let go you can see that Photoshop will heal it all by itself. And so I can come through here, and if I had an image like this old picture I found on the internet and had a lot of scratches, we could very easily fix that just by using the spot healing brush. Now there's a downside to the fact that it uses a content-aware fill. So right there you'll notice that as I go over it, it goes, oh okay, it's a lighter gray here. I'll use that to replace the scratch. If I get too close to a person or to a different element, like this scratch next to the lady's dress, you'll notice that it's a little too light there. It's because Photoshop isn't very bright. It looks at all the colors nearby and it goes, okay, there's some darker colors and some lighter colors, and it tries to use a mixture of the two. So in some cases you'll find that the spot healing brush won't work, and in that case we'll have to use the clone stamp tool, which is something that we'll discuss in another one of these tutorials, how to do that. And so you can see in this process, though, we can move very quickly, and I'd probably get a smaller brush for some of these smaller ones, and I could go through here and fix most of these. Now if it's on a person's face, you have to be very careful, because once again the content aware doesn't always do that. Watch what happens if I, like, yeah, it's kind of a, or if you have to be very careful when you're dealing with something where there's a lot of detail or a lot of different elements. But for like backgrounds, for in this case this curtain, because it's pretty consistent, this is a very useful tool for this. And I can go through here and very quickly fix a lot of these scratches. Same thing, like I said, with blemishes, with like facial blemishes, you could solve this as well. With this one, this ear, I may find that it doesn't quite work correctly, so I might have to use a different tool for that. And so this is, when you have something you want to correct, I would try this tool first, because it's easy to use. It takes just a few seconds of clicking, and you can hold down your mouse and drag along the scratch too. So see, as long as you don't let go, you see that it darkens the area that you've selected. And for the most part, this will work. It solves a lot of problems. If this doesn't work, it doesn't take too long to figure that out, and then you can use one of the more advanced do-it-yourself resources that we have to solve these kinds of problems. You can see here in just a couple of minutes, let me get back to, I'll just use the history to show you how it originally looked. So in just a couple of minutes I've been able to fix a lot of the scratches and make it look more like the original photo did before all of these changes happen. So I would spend a couple of minutes just getting used to how this tool works. If you find some of the longer scratches, try holding down your mouse and dragging it along there. And then you can go over something several times with this spot healing brush, and each time it should try to standardize it more with the colors that are around that blemish. You don't need to turn this one in, but go ahead and use it as a practice. Now the next thing that we'll be doing, the one that you will turn in, we'll use this same technique, but we're going to mix it up a little bit. So I will go ahead and exit out of this. I can press Control W to close, or click on this little X there. And the one that I want you to bring in next is called Wrinkles. So if you can drag that over or go File Open and find the file that is called Wrinkles inside of the Digital Media 1 shared folder, it is this person. Now, we can use a similar technique to correct for a lot of things. In this picture, the photographer used very harsh lighting on the guy's face, and so his wrinkles are especially prominent, more so than they'd be if you were just looking at him. So the photographer wanted to be able to soften those a little bit, not remove them completely. That's ethically probably not very sound, and also it's going to make someone look really weird. As you can see, if you use this brush just as is, don't do this, just watch what I'm doing here. But you can see as it tries to kind of standardize the color of his skin, what you're going to get is you're going to lose a lot of the stuff that makes skin look like skin. The translucency, how you can see blood passing underneath the skin, pores, all of that texture and detail goes away the more often that you go over it with this. And you're going to get a really blotchy, unrealistic looking person if you try to use this on the face. So the technique that we'll use is a little different. We're not going to go over it just like we did with those with the last photograph where we were fixing the scratches. Let me undo the changes that I did here. I'm just going back into the history and going back to the beginning. What we will do instead, and this is where you can start following along, is I will create a new layer above this background image. And this new layer I can call I don't know, wrinkle correction, or you can just leave it as layer 1. It doesn't really matter. But in this case, what we're going to do is the same technique. But now on a new layer, this will allow us to have more control over the changes we're making. Now, if I just use the spot healing brush on layer 1, by default, tools will only apply to the layer that they're on. Now, layer 1 actually looks like this if I make the background layer invisible. So what I'm doing is actually copying nothing and placing nothing, so nothing is happening. What I can do in some cases is turn on this option here at the top along the properties for the spot healing brush. It's called Sample All Layers. Now, even though I'm on layer 1 is light blue, it will also be looking at the pixel color information from the background layer. And even though it's looking at the background layer, I'll still be, when I click, it'll still be placing all of the new color on layer 1. So you're going to look at this and it's going to look exactly the same as what I was doing before at first. And maybe I'll get a smaller brush so I can follow these. And right now it looks like, oh, I'm doing exactly the same thing I didn't want to do before, which is just getting rid of those. I'm making an average of the skin tones, which is losing a lot of the personality in the face, and it just doesn't look very good. But now what I'm actually doing, if I turn that background layer invisible, is those corrections are kind of like a mask on top of the background layer. They're on layer 1. And because of that, I can take layer 1 now, come over here to the opacity, and turn the opacity down. As I do so, I'm making that layer more transparent. So now there is a mask of skin colored whatever on top of this person, but I've turned it down so you can still see through it somewhat to the wrinkles behind it. And if I make that invisible, you can see how strong it was originally versus how much lighter it is before. And now that opacity is down, I can continue to go across all of these wrinkles and just lighten them slightly. So we're not changing how he looks in any way. We're just lightening the way that the shadows and the highlights hit those wrinkles. And it's going to give you a much more realistic effect. It's a lot more subtle, and it's going to look really good for a lot of different techniques that you can use in making retouches to faces. Now, if I decide that that's even too strong for that, I can always come back here and decrease the opacity more or increase it. So I have permanent control over how transparent that layer is, which allows me to make some more tweaks to it. So for this assignment, what I'd like you to do is go through and just retouch his face. And there's some places where you might not want to mess with it as much. Under the eyes, you want to be careful. You don't want to go over the eyes itself, or you're going to cause some weird problems to happen. But just for the most part, the best way to use this tool is just to get a brush a little bit bigger than the size of the wrinkle, and then follow the wrinkle while you're holding down the mouse and dragging. And you'll see that dark gray appear to show you where it's going to apply as soon as you let go of the mouse. And then as soon as you let go, it's going to lighten it up quite a bit. And if you turn off your background layer temporarily, you can see how weird it's going to look. And that's the mask that's semi-transparent that you'll see through. And so once again, when I'm all done with that, go ahead and spend 5 or 10 minutes getting some of those wrinkles there, just so you have some good experience with that, getting used to how that works. And then you can even make the visibility on that layer turn off, so you can see how big of a difference it is here. So once again, that's with my semi-transparent covering layer. That's without it. This is a pretty big difference there. So go ahead and save that file as your class period, last name, first initial, space, wrinkles, and make sure that that's a JPEG, and submit that to my Drop It To Me folder.